First-person shooters in today's day and age is admittedly all about the multiplayer. From Halo to Call of Duty, Battlefield, and from other more milsim experiences like Squad, Arma 3, Ready or Not, all these games have a main focus in the multiplayer, whether cooperatively or against each other. But what happens if a studio makes a first-person shooter connecting to its roots and making a single-player only experience? In 2014, we got just that from Machine Games in the form of Wolfenstein The New Order, a reboot to a franchise that brought us the first-person shooter decades ago. 8 years later, how does this game hold up? Is it still as awesome as it was to me upon release? This is the first that we're going to be doing in the Wolfenstein reboot series on this channel, so let's discuss why and if this game still is a great story-driven FPS. If you enjoy these long-form video essays about games, new and old, please consider hitting that subscription button down below. On that note, let's hop into Wolfenstein The New Order. Let's go ahead and travel back into the Wayback Machine real quick to May 5th, 1992. From probably one of the most influential video game companies in our video game history, we got Wolfenstein 3D from id Software. This game was seminal in video game history and cemented the first-person shooter and bringing it to the mainstream arena, birthing one of the most popular genre of games today. With this type of pedigree, it's hard not to argue how important this game was upon everything we play today. Taking the camera and placing you in the eyes of the main character was something still relatively new at the time, and giving the players the ability to actually pull the trigger on your firearm at the bad guy was just straight up immersive. It still is, honestly. And looking back on this game, it's relatively simplistic in its art style, and, working in DOS back in the day was, not really a relatively artistic medium. Honestly, Wolfenstein 3D reminds me of that brick maze screensaver for Windows 95. But it's easy to see the influences this game has on games like Doom and Quake to come afterward. After its initial release, however, Wolfenstein as a series just kind of faded into obscurity. We got a bunch of okay shooters and even one Wolfenstein RPG, which I'm super curious about now in researching for this video. But in my opinion, I think it's safe to say that Wolfenstein never really had the prominent draw of games such as Doom and Quake 3 back in the day. And especially so in 2014 when Call of Duty and Battlefield were in the throes of its heyday of being the most popular games on the face of the planet. That was until The New Order. On a gameplay front, Machine Games was able to craft a shooter that was not only really good feeling to play, but also something that really touched with its nostalgic and original roots from way back in, 1992. And then on a narrative front, create something that's truly fucking interesting and I think stands up in the face of many other games that we've played today that are a more story-based experience. But what truly stands out about Wolfenstein The New Order is not any of that, but the fact that it was able to take a stand, take a risk, and make a single-player only first-person shooter in today's day and age. No multiplayer, no co-op, just a story that stood up by itself and for you, the player, to experience on your own time at your own pace. That to me is the standout of Wolfenstein The New Order and the Wolfenstein series reboot as a whole. The focus on world building, character development, and marrying it with solid shooter mechanics really brought the series forward while also sticking to the roots that it had set prior to this game. Now, before we get into the world and the narrative of The New Order, let's take a look at how it plays as a shooter itself. When looking at the gameplay and shooting mechanics of Wolfenstein The New Order, it could best be described as a marriage of old and new when it comes to the shooter genre. First, let's look at the old school mechanics. Even with games like Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, and Quake, everything is a pickup. Ammo, health, armor, all the pickups require a button press to acquire. Harkening back to how shooters were, this is definitely a throwback mechanic that threw me at first blush. I've gotten so used to just running over guns on the ground to scoop up the ammo and items to give shield and health that for the first hour or so, I died a shit ton, either due to the no health issue, the no ammo issue, because I wasn't just mashing button presses. In this playthrough, I knew it was coming, but this choice did confuse me a little bit. Shooters such as Halo, Call of Duty, and Battlefield have stripped away the picking up anything in game to focus just purely on the action, smoothing out the experience to its purest essence of action and shooting. While I'm glad that we have evolved past this, there is a sense of nostalgia in The New Order of having to search for resources in between or even during fights, to not have to go back to the checkpoint because, dead. I have to say, it does make the fights a little bit more interesting, especially when you're low on ammo or health. And unfortunately, there's no resources around you, while a continuous stream of Nazis attempt to bum rush you in order to, cement your impending death. This also forces the player to fully utilize their arsenal at your disposal, forcing weapon swaps due to lack of ammunition and not being able to find anything. There's a lot of weapons in this game I never would have tried, especially the laser craft book, which we'll talk about in a little bit. A gun kind of sucks in my opinion, but when you have no ammo, you have to use what you have. Speaking of health and armor, yeah, you need to pick those up too. Unlike current shooters, you actually need to pay attention to your health and armor, as they don't fully regenerate on their own, much like the shooters of old before Halo. Combat Evolved cemented this into the lexicon of shooters today. The New Order does have a little bit of a grace period, with your health always rounding up to the nearest 20 after staying out of combat for a little bit, but all in all, you don't replenish anything, and you need to find them or else you'll be sitting at 20 health for the entire rest of the level. There's also the mechanic from old school shooters known as overcharge. Essentially, you push your health pool past the cap of 100 all the way to 200. However, in this mode, your health will slowly deplete over time, going back down to the max of 100. This can really help in a pinch though, as if you know you're about to face a bunch of massive enemies and you want to push the fight, you can overcharge your health. You can take more damage before needing to retreat, letting you get off that last magazine to hopefully finish the fight before the damage ekes into your regular health pool. This is a give and take though, as you need to consume med items in the area to do this, meaning they won't be there or when you actually need them to get your health back to the cap of 100. So when looking to overcharge, it's always important to pay attention to what's around you, or you could easily fuck yourself in the long haul. Meanwhile, the resource of armor acts as damage mitigation, leaving this to be super important as well to the whole staying alive thing. Collecting helmets, vests, metal pieces off of the super soldiers net you armor, so hitting headshots, finding them in the world, and killing the big boys all net you a positive as well in order to stay alive just that little bit longer. In the gameplay, we need to talk about probably the most important thing in any shooter, the weapons and the shooting in Wolfenstein. The guns in this game are based off of Nazi weapons in World War II, but futurized, and honestly feel really good to shoot. Every weapon feels chunky and brutal, with the sound of the piston hitting the bullet, which is firing from this steel-clad chamber. And you can hear and feel the punch of every round leaving the barrel of the weapon. From the pistol to the machine gun and the shotgun, each one of these serve a role in the sandbox as well. Your pistol is equipped with a silencer for sneaking your way, assassinating every Nazi in front of you. Your machine gun is exactly what you think it is, a primary Nazi killing machine. You obtain the shotgun when taking over the submarine about halfway through the game, inherently telling the player to use this in close quarters combat. Each weapon is also equipped with a secondary function as well. The marksman rifle turns into a laser weapon. The shotgun has pellet rounds that bounce, shredding unarmored Nazis. This is an awesome mechanic as it takes your existing arsenal and adds further utility to it, basically doubling the weapon utility and giving you that much more ability to murder as many Nazis as humanly possible. Every weapon is also able to be dual wielded as well, one gun in each hand, trading accuracy and reload time for twice the amount of ammunition to be thrown at your enemies and killing them hopefully twice as fast. This is great for the larger enemies like the super soldiers, as they are easier to hit and require more ammo to be spent to kill them, such as like the dudes with the massive metal suits. You have grenades and throwing knives, but the most unique weapon in the New Order is the Lasercraft, or the laser cutter. The weapon runs off battery and not only melts armor off of Nazis, but is also used for traversal and level as well, cutting through fences, opening metal crates, and getting into air ducts. It honestly feels like the answer to the gravity gun in Half-Life 2, where it's more of a utility weapon to get your way through the levels, finding more resources and collectibles as well. Each weapon, minus the marksman rifle, is all iron sights, as the Nazis, I guess, didn't have red dots in 1962, but each weapon picture is clear and usable, minus the silenced pistol. Normally, I hate iron sights in games, but these hit just right for me for some reason. With the pistol, the silencer does get in the way of the iron sights, making it a little tough to gauge in a quick shot. Overall, the weapons and the shooting in Wolfenstein is crisp, fun, and most of all, beefy. I do wish that there was a little bit more feedback when hitting your target, but with the feedback of these weapons alone, it's hard to complain about some solid shooting mechanics that Machine Games provides in the New Order. What really stands out when playing the New Order is the moment-to-moment gameplay loop. The options given to how to tackle an encounter are varied and equally viable. The stealth in this game feels surprisingly good and forgiving, which in a first-person shooter where your field of view and the amount of vision that you have is limited to, the 180 degrees in front of you, and with that feels very forgiving. When it comes to Nazi murder and stealth, you have a few options to your advantage. You have the silent takedown from behind, you have the silenced pistol, which works wonders for clearing an area and taking out field commanders from afar, as well as having the throwing knife, which it basically acts as a pistol, but a lot fucking cooler. This is important as if they spot you, they will sound the alarm, sending a string of never-ending zombies to come and kill you until you end that commander's life. However, if you want to go in guns blazing, dual-wielding machine guns and murdering everybody in your way, this is also perfectly viable and oftentimes a lot faster and can be a lot more fun. Just push the commander, end his life, murder the rest. If you want to go pure stealth and don't want to kill anyone, you could do that too in most scenarios. The amount of ways to tackle the objective is refreshing and fun and makes this game feel super replayable, along with getting tons of collectibles in the game as well. There are a lot of reasons to come back needed in a single player only first person shooter game. The enemy variety in Wolfenstein The New Order is diverse as well. You have the shotgun boys, the rocket launcher boys, the cannon fodder boys, you have dogs to kill, you have heavy boys, heavier boys, flying boys. There's a lot of boys to murder in Wolfenstein. Having this variety of enemies keeps the sandbox fresh, and the way that they pace it and trickle these guys out to you literally all the way throughout the game is awesome and really makes it feel like you're ramping up to just killing the biggest guys as possible by the end of the game. I personally took a stealth approach for most of this game, but there's often times that I just wanted to whip out the two shotguns and blow the whole corridor away. The pacing in this game is awesome, and the moment to moment is a fucking blast. And by the end, you're left with a nice warm fuzzy taste in your mouth of having a damn good time in Wolfenstein The New Order. Before we hop into the narrative, we need to talk about the musical soundtrack of Wolfenstein The New Order as well. You may know Mick Gordon from being the creator of the 2016 Doom soundtrack, but did you know he's also responsible for the music in Wolfenstein Reboot series as well? He's really been making a name for himself in video games recently, with Wolfenstein The New Order being the first game I really know him from, and it truly doesn't disappoint. The soundtrack goes predominantly between two styles, the hard guitar riffs and percussion during the large action scenes, and something I can only describe as a Quentin Tarantino flick or a Guy Ritchie soundtrack. The air of mystery and mischief while BJ and the Resistance are planning their next mission to stick it to the Nazis.
Feet and silent breath. Refuge from the storm.
The way the soundtrack conveys the tone of either what is currently happening or the build-up for what is going to happen is astonishingly good, with every track having a great ramp-up into the action, leading to the core hard-hitting aspect of the actual musical piece. The amount of distortion and electronic beats behind the track really give this unsettling aspect of seeing the Nazis in control of everything. When the tone gets serious, however, the acoustic tracks, feeling sad, lost, or lonely comes into play, really conveying the severity of the moment. Mick Gordon is easily one of my absolute favorite composers in gaming right now, who has a very distinct style behind him on each game he has been working on. It's a shame of his falling out with it on the last Doom game, but for this game the soundtrack absolutely slaps and works well with bringing the extra oomph to the narrative. Speaking of narrative, I think it's time we get into the world and story of Wolfenstein The New Order and what sets this game out from other FPS games out there today.
Knowledge stacked high, magnificent inventions, things that to you will seem like magic.
The year is 1946, and you start the game on a plane invading Germany in World War II as B.J. Blazkowicz. If you know your history, you know that this is an alternative history piece where the Allies didn't cross the Rhine, we never dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, and the Nazis are still very much in power. In fact, even winning the war. I have to say here, I'm an absolute sucker for alternative history games done well, and Wolfenstein The New Order introduces it brilliantly. However, the opening prologue section of this game absolutely sucks. I hate being that guy that says, play for the first hour, get through the first hour, and then the game will get good. But in Wolfenstein The New Order, it is most definitely the case. I pray that if you play this, make it past the prologue, and then make your decisions on whether to keep playing or not. This entire plane sequence, which is just a glorified tutorial, is absolutely boring, really repetitive, and honestly kind of dumb. And you do mechanics you don't even do in the rest of the game when it comes to the gun battery on the plane itself. But let's get back to it. BJ is on the way to Death's Head compound to kill him and try to put an end to the Nazi war machine, with Death's Head being the main R&D scientist in general behind the Nazi tech expansion. From the robot dogs to futuristic soldiers powered by Tesla coils, mutated super soldiers, and how advanced the Nazi planes are, you can see why they're actually winning this war. You were introduced to two other main characters as well. Who's the pilot in your plane and is part of the RAF, and a competent leader having been in the war since the beginning, and Private Wyatt, still green as a military man and inexperienced. BJ and his unit who survives the invasion and subsequent plane crash. And you push on to invade the giant Nazi castle, only to be captured by Death's Head himself, where you're forced to choose who you will experiment on. This singular choice actually branches on how certain aspects of the story will play out and the characters that will surround BJ in the rest of the game. In this playthrough, I sacrificed Fergus, leaving me to go down the Wyatt timeline, but you can easily swap roles and have Fergus be with you later in the game. This gives replayability of at least one more playthrough, as I do think that both are worth seeing. With this, I was hoping there would be more choices like this in the game, but this is really the only one. After General Death's Head sucks the brain out of Fergus to experiment on, he leaves BJ and Wyatt alone to escape. Upon jumping out the window, BJ gets hit with a shrapnel from an explosion, lodging a piece of metal into his brain and instantly putting him in the form of a waking coma. For 14 years, he's rendered essentially an awake vegetable, sitting and being taken care of by a mental institution in Poland. The nurse there, Anya, takes care of him as well, and BJ watches as the Nazis come and take patients away for testing over and over again. It's not until the Nazis come down to shut down the clinic itself and murder the doctor and his wife and took Anya away that BJ awakes and begins his spree of Nazi killing. Blazkowicz rescues Anya and with the help of her grandparents make their way to Berlin to free the resistance. This is where one of the best sequences of the game takes place, and this is where the New Order truly shines, in its ability to slow the story down to just reach those pinnacle character development moments. What this also does is further flesh out the world, who's important in it, and why they are the way they are. BJ's in the dining car getting coffee for himself and Anya when the labor force commander, Frau Engel, and her boy toy Booby show up, asking BJ to sit down to perform a racial purity test. This small section is harrowing, as the performance of Frau Engel here is phenomenal in showing how unhinged and slightly psychotic and yet completely put together she is. She truly believes everything that she's spouting to you right here.
Ja, das werden wir bald wissen, nicht wahr? Diesmal wählen Sie das Bild, das Sie am meisten mit Abscheu erfüllt.
She reminds me a ton of Hans Landa, the Nazi officer from Inglourious Basterds, being coy and yet having a feeling like there's always an ulterior motive as well as behind everything he says. As an antagonist, Frau Engel is great, and this performance and writing should truly be commended, which is why I haven't mentioned until now, but given the fact that everybody here is a German Nazi, I truly appreciate the fact that Machine Games went above and beyond with ensuring that the German that everybody speaks in this game is overtly true to form and actually real German. I know this is like a really small critique, but like 4/5 of the entire cast of this game, including all of the enemies you kill, speak literally word perfect German. It truly actually gets that immersion into it, something that a lot of games tend to miss out on, or at least it doesn't feel nearly as real and impactful. They let Blazkowicz go and him and Anya go, and they make the sexy time in the car until they reach Berlin, where BJ decides that he's going to go into the main prison camp there and rescue the resistance fighters in the prison camp. Finds out that Wyatt, or Fergus if you pick that timeline, is captured there as well, and they lead you to basically escape and meet up with the rest of the resistance. In the base, you meet Carolina Baker, the leader of the group, who is wheelchair bound but knows her shit. Klaus, an ex-Nazi officer turned resistance member after the Nazis killed his wife and son for his son having a disability. Max Haas, who, much like Hodor from Game of Thrones, only can say Max Haas and has this uber childlike nature about him, but also the air of there's something more behind his appearance. And Jay is here specifically for the Wyatt timeline, and you find him playing guitar, dropping acid, and not really doing much around the base. He cares a lot about his comrades though, while harboring some resentment at first for BJ for the injustices done to African Americans prior to World War II. After a small tiff, a little bit of fighting, and a good old-fashioned guitar picking and acid dropping, the two really do become quick friends, which leads to his death being far more impactful than it probably should have been. With Blazkowicz completely ingratiated in the resistance now, they've gone to go different ways ways of sticking it to the Nazis, from stealing advanced helicopters, sneaking into concentration camps to free a man, sabotaging the Nazi concrete from inside that they build all of their massive structures with, named Set Roth. Set Roth is a member of an organization called Dat Jude. I butchered that. A group dedicated to creating futuristic technologies and advancing scientific discoveries. From there, the group moved to capture a German nuclear submarine and go to the fucking moon to get the nuclear codes for the warheads on board. Upon returning to Earth, you find Frau Engel has raided your base, killing Jay and capturing Anya and everybody else, except Caroline, who is now suited with a fancy new super suit, and Wyatt, who's just hiding in a corner like a baby. The three move to assault Death's Head's compound and save your friends and kill General Death's Head in the process. Upon murdering a metric shit ton of Nazis, you're ambushed by Boy Toy Booby, where he drugs you only to have BJ break out of that trance and brutally execute him in front of Frau Engel on camera. This scene is harrowing in the fact of the way that you completely obliterate this poor man, all while his lover watches from a TV set, and you just feel the seething rage behind her entire look as she walks off camera to go and hunt down the man who just killed her boy toy. Anya and Set have escaped on their own, and BJ heads onward to finish the mission he started 14 years ago. Upon reaching Death's Head and having a piff for tat between the two, Death's Head takes the brain of Fergus, in my case, the man who he sucked the brain out of 14 years ago, and shoves him in a giant robot in order to forcing him to kill BJ. BJ then obviously has to forcibly kill something that's kind of talking like his old friend. While bizarre and quirky, this is something supremely fucked up that it's pretty fucking tragic. BJ dispatches the robot and subsequently Death's Head himself in a pretty fucking epic battle with tons of fire and explosions and shit, leaving BJ, intestines hanging out and on the brink of death, watching his friends move to escape. We then fade to black.
Homeless. Tempest tossed.
Wolfenstein in a moment-to-moment story is good, but nothing really all that special. What makes this game stand out for me is the voice acting, character development, and world building occurring in this game. Seeing how the Nazis took over literally everything in 1960, crushing everything in their way with the advanced technologies, gives a bizarre fascination to seeing something similar and yet completely foreign. London is now just a series of giant Nazi structures erected all over the city. Knowing that America succumbed to the fate that we enacted on the Japanese in World War II, with the Nazis dropping an atomic bomb on New York City, forcing the most powerful nation to its knees, is thought-provoking and pretty fucking interesting. The futuristic and yet brutal and industrial look of the Nazi war machine is awesome. Couple that with the spy and espionage tone set by the resistance in sneaking into Nazi-occupied areas to cause havoc and risk life and limb to gain an edge to not only survive but thrive is fun and lighthearted and also tragic at the same time. And BJ's unwavering patriotism is strangely comforting to me. He bleeds the red, white, and blue. And while he knows he's not good at many things, he knows he's good at one thing in particular: killing Nazis. And he says it a lot. During the game, there's an inner monologue with BJ reflecting on his past, his thoughts, and brooding over losing all that he cares about, and worrying about his new friends and new lover Anya. Their love story is, I don't know, kind of hit or miss. They kind of just have sex a lot, but they start caring for each other literally after they have sex once heading to Berlin. I guess when you save somebody from Nazis, that's generally maybe what happens. He's more than just a meathead though, but a meathead with feelings. Nothing he says is eloquent in words, but the tone and emotion makes the softer side of BJ begin to appear while blasting dozens of Nazis away on a bridge you completely wrecked just about 5 minutes ago. I love the tone in Wolfenstein The New Order, as it brings this lighthearted feeling to something that's truly so dour at the same time. The world it creates and the outlandish scenarios and characters Machine Games has brought to life in this game. While the narrative itself is good, the game really stands apart in the world building it provides and builds, and especially how it's executed. With that, I want to wrap this video up on Wolfenstein The New Order. This game is well worth playing, and with it being on Game Pass, I implore you to check it out. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like button down below and leave a comment. It all helps please the algorithm gods and makes this video get out to more people. And if you want more videos like this one, please consider hitting that sub button as well, so you can know when we get more videos out like this here real soon. Thank you all for your time, and like always, my name is Brendan, and I'll see you guys in the next one.